All right. Hey, everyone on the phone. I think we're ready to start. Oh, one quick thing. We're turning off the sound on our other computer.
There we go.
Okay. Darci, you're still there?
I'm here.
Perfect. Okay. We can hear you loud and clear. So I think any housekeeping before we get started, Alex?
I just want to welcome everybody to this meeting. We'd like to thank Riptide for hosting us. Let's give them a round of applause for this great accommodation. We've been searching for a home for the last few months and years, so
give or take.
Yeah. So hopefully, if this works out, maybe we'll keep doing this. Next month, we're going to be our annual meeting at UCF on February 16th. Is it? 13th?
I think it's the 13th.
13th. Tuesday. It's a Tuesday, correct? So
yes.
Our usual meeting date is on a Thursday, so this is a Tuesday at the UCF campus and the Student Union on the 3rd floor, I believe. So
we'll be sending out all those details by email as per usual.
Exactly. So make sure that you're on our email list. If we don't have your information, let us know, and then we'll make sure to keep you up to date on everything. And also, one of our biggest focus right now is the STC conference is coming up here in 4 months in May 20th to the 23rd. It's going to be at the Orlando Hyatt Regency, the former Peabody Hotel on iDrive. And registration is open. And actually, there's the 65th anniversary the rate that goes up until the end of January. Mm-hmm. So you want to get in on that deal. It's pretty discounted. So
and no travel costs because for those of us who are here,
exactly.
For those of us who aren't, it's totally worthwhile to come to Orlando.
So get with your company. Maybe try to get them to send you, since there will be no travel costs. So
I'm trying.
Yeah.
All right. So just some housekeeping stuff for the presentation. I'm running the slides from my computer, and Alex is running the chat. So if you have questions, Darci and I said we were okay with people piping up on the phone, or if you're more comfortable, put something in the chat, and Alex will be managing that.
Absolutely.
And I think that's pretty much it. If you have any technical difficulties, also put that in the chat, and I will make that Alex's problem since he was so kind to volunteer. So thank you, Alex.
No problem.
Thank you, Alex.
All right, so just to get started, this is on an intro to MadCap Flare, and we did start at 7:15. So here's the agenda. Darci and I wanted to keep this pretty high level since it's an introduction, since not everyone has used the tool. So we're starting with an overview and then kind of walking through the user interface. We decided to do that because it really gives a good overview of also the functionality of Flare, what you can do, what are all the moving parts. And then we were going to move into some best practices and tips. This will also be helpful for those who are a little more experienced. So I'm sure some of those of you who are in the room who are advanced users, you also have lots of things to share. Also, if you could silence your phones. Thank you. Sorry. And at the end, we're going to have a Q&A. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself first. So for those who don't know me or just met me in the past 20 minutes, I'm Bethany Aguad. I'm a technical documentation specialist at Fiserv in the lending division where I work with Darci. So I have a BA and an MA in English Technical Communication. Dan Jones can attest to this as one of my professors. He can vouch for me.
I vouch for you.
Yeah. And here in the Orlando, Central Florida chapter of STC, I am the treasurer, and I'm also on the Society Scholarship Committee. So I'm going to hand it off to my I was going to say cohort, but that sounds sinister. To my co-presenter, Darci, to introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for including me today. And I'm getting over bronchitis, so if you have trouble hearing me or if I cough, I apologize. And just let me know if I'm not speaking clearly, and I'll try to move the mic a little closer. As Bethany said, we work together in different locations. I work actually from my home since my office closed a year and a half ago. And I have been with Fiserv for 14 years. Most of that time I have worked for them as a technical writer. And I have used Flare for the last almost 10 years. They were only in, I think, version 2 or 2 point something when I started using it. They didn't even have the ability to produce PDFs out of Flare at that time. So I've been using it a while, but that doesn't mean I know everything, because Flare is just really versatile, as we'll explain in a minute. What I do in my job is I manage online help for a particular product, as well as their user and admin and technical guides. And then I also do release notes for about 6 different products right now. And anything else that comes up, write articles for a newsletter that we were doing for a while in our division, how-tos for different Microsoft products, that kind of thing. And for a short while early in my technical writing career, I got myself in trouble by complaining too much about the UI on a new product. So they decided I should be responsible for overseeing it. And so for a while, in addition to technical writing, I also oversaw screen design and would nitpick on what's not consistent. And then I actually became responsible for designing icons as well. So that was all everything I've learned about all of this has been in my time at Fiserv. So I really feel thankful for that. And I'm a big Flare fan. That's why Bethany thought I'd make a good co-presenter for this.
Yeah, and I'm relatively new to Flare. It's really just been a year and a half, but Darci's been mentoring me in it. So I was like, let me make sure I have someone extremely qualified to help me with this presentation so I don't get myself into trouble. So, all right. So we're just going to start with the overview of kind of what is MadCap Flare. For those who are already familiar, you can feel free to nod along or you know, shoot finger guns at me or whatever. You're like, yes, that still sounds correct. For those who are new, enjoy learning about Flare.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll try to make this as exciting as possible with Bethany's Vanna presentation of the slides. For those of you in the room, Flare is a single source content management tool. I would imagine that most of you are familiar with that term. If you're not, single sourcing is the opportunity to create multiple outputs, such as PDF, Word, online help, or other types of outputs. And in the application itself, you have the option to create multiple styles for different types of products or different type of projects, all from the same source of content, as well as you reuse content across multiple topics and multiple projects by only having to edit it in one location and having it update across the application. And we'll get into all the details, but it really just allows you to manage, you know, a multitude of projects and products, whether it's in one project for Flare or multiple projects for Flare. It's really unlimited what you can do. And you can even create full professional quality publishable books. So it's really open-ended. And I'll get to the next slide. Okay, so single source XML authoring. If you're not technical as far as the coding side of it, which is unlikely in this group, you probably are, and it's in one way or another. XML is a standard language that's used across the board, and Flare uses it as XHTML. So it's a form of HTML coding in the backside, and it uses it along with standard cascading style sheets. Whereas in Word, you'll have Word's proprietary way of controlling styles in your document. In Flare, they use mostly standard CSS. And they do have some custom pieces in there as well, but it makes it really open-ended, so you can bring content in from other places or style sheets, as well as take what you create in Flare and use it in other places. So it really allows you, so what this does is it allows you to use content across different forms of media and multiple times. So you can share the project and single source amongst a team of writers and subject matter experts. And you can manage multiple outputs and different versions from one instance of the source content using conditional tags, variables, targets, and different tables of contents. So there's about as many ways to approach Flare and how you want to manage your projects and your output as there are people probably using it.
So one thing we did want to make sure we went over is a little bit about topic-based authoring for those who aren't familiar with actually doing that as an approach. So it's really a modular approach to your content creation. So that's really important for that XML, you do that content reuse for your content management that Darci was talking about. So Flare supports these advanced topic-based authoring features that lets you publish all those outputs and all of that. So just to go over topic-based authoring, it's a modular approach to content creation where your content is structured around topics that can be used and reused in different contexts. So it's chunking your information into short topics that are little discrete pieces of information rather than having long chapters or documents as you would in a traditional Word document. So I came across this and I thought it was a great way to describe it. It's like each topic is like a link in a chain. It can exist on its own, but also you link them together to create the chain, which is your content. So you can swap those around and it's different for whatever chain you're trying to produce. So I thought that was helpful just to think about that because that really underlies everything that you can do in Flare is having all of your content in these topics. All right, so something Darci also mentioned is publishing to multiple outputs. So Flare supports multi-channel publishing. So that means that you can create content that's meant to be viewed on multiple devices, whether that's a PDF or a responsive HTML5 website, a mobile device, or like EPUB for e-readers. And you can set up everything in Flare so that when you publish to all of these outputs, you can have the look and feel you want for your content. So it'll be consistent across the board, and that will be through style sheet mediums, which we're going to bring up later. So whether it's producing PDFs or your HTML5, you control the main source of your content. So once you have all of your styles and everything structured the way you want, you can easily just produce your content in that desired output without having to go through and customize everything every single time.
Bethany,
Yes.
I'd like to make a comment. One thing I can tell you that it doesn't output to is it does not output into a mill standard XML. So we're working one-on-one with MadCap, and while it is an XML tool on the back end, and you can produce all your content up front and create your online content online help PDF, you cannot export that directly to a mill standard XML format because I'm being contracted to rewrite all the Flare documentation in the XML. So Just a caution for those who are working with mill standard XML.
Okay, that's something I didn't know. It hasn't come up since we're, in the finance industry. Not
working out.
All right, so I'm gonna.
It's a great tool.
All right, go to the next slide.
Yeah, they'll get there. They're constantly listening to their users. So, one thing about MadCap, and aside from our presentation itself, is one of the benefits is that they listen to their users. They have great customer service, and they do everything within their power to try to make things work the way you need them to. They can't perform miracles, but they definitely listen. And there are very few times where we requested a feature where either it just so happened a lot of other people were too, or they just recognized it was a good idea. And, within a release or two, it was in there. So they're a really well put together company.
Yeah. I actually was really excited one time. I submitted a bug and then they told me they're like, and it's going in the next release. And I was like, oh, I'm so glad I contributed to the improvement of the application. Let me save this and put it in a frame.
Yeah, back in the early days of Flare, I would be on the phone with them, and I almost everything I would call back with, and be like, oh, that's a bug. We're gonna let's take that to development. So they really do listen, and they really do want you to be happy with the product, and that's important. But back to the presentation, as Bethany and I had mentioned along in previous slides, one of the things that is a benefit to any really good source or single source tool is consistent formatting. And so with mostly standard style sheets, controlling formatting across multiple outputs, it really makes a difference because you're able to really limit how many places you go in order to control your formatting and your page layouts and your headers, your footers, and all the other elements. And, instead of going into 10 different documents and making sure they're linked to another Word document or another file to make sure they're all matching styles, you really just have to go to one place. And it's really about how you set it up in the early days. And if you're really, patient and cautious with how you set it up in the early days in a Flare project, you will have a nice streamlined set of source files or main files to use for a long time. And it will be easy to update them when you do have changes.
Sorry, maybe
no, it's still me. Sorry, I'm still here. Excuse me. All right, so multiple authors. So it's not always the case. I know that a large percentage of technical writers and content editors, work in kind of in a silo situation where it's just you're responsible for the content. But I think that's changing more and more, where there's a lot of overlap between different authors and writers and editors. And so, in the past, you'd have, multiple versions of a document that you'd have to merge, or you'd have to use track changes in Word. I don't know about the rest of you, but it's not my friend, at least in Word, track changes. And when you're dealing with numerous different subject matter experts who don't know how to use Word the way that most technical writers know how, you can have 5 different changes to the same sentence by the time you get it back, and you really have to sort through a lot of stuff. So Flare really makes it multi-author friendly by allowing you to control the content from one source. And then there's different tools you can use in Flare. You can either access through source control applications like Team Foundation Server or Subversion or Perforce, or any one of them, and you can just have your local project linked, and that enables you through integrations to be able to not step on each other's toes and not mess up the content, or not be unaware of what someone else is doing. So that's one way to do it. And the other way multiple authors can work is if you have subject matter experts that are your authors and are not Flare users. They have an integrated tool called Contribute, or actually it's Contributor. And it's basically a dumb version of Flare, meaning a subject matter expert doesn't have to know Flare to be able to work on a source file for Flare that you can easily bring back into Flare and have all your styles intact and not have them completely undoing all the editing you've already done to a document. And Flare retains a history of changes. You can turn that on and off just like in Word, and you can tag content or topics based on who the author is or the writer or the subject matter expert. You can pretty much create tags for topics and content in Flare for any reason. So it's customizable. So you can have 10 tags to label files based on who's responsible or what product it is, or you can, you don't have to use the feature at all, but it's available. And whether you're using source control or a shared network folder, the changes that you make are immediately available to all the authors who have access. So as long as you have good connectivity in your office or in your business, then multiple authoring is really a lot more efficient in Flare than I've seen in other products.
Okay, so I mentioned that our intention was to go through kind of the UI and what are the elements of Flare. When we were creating this presentation, we were kind of looking at, should we try to go through the steps for how to create a topic? But if you haven't used Flare, you're not familiar with what is actually in it, it's pretty overwhelming because there's all these different pieces and different content in different places. So we decided to walk through kind of each of where are things located in Flare, what do they mean? Because Flare has its own particular jargon to some extent for what it calls different aspects of your documentation. So we wanted to just go through what each of those are and give a little bit of context for each. Feel free to ask questions if we say anything that's confusing or skim over something you want to know more about.
Or if you know something that we didn't mention about Flare and you think that we should be sharing that information.
Amazing insights. Feel free. So one of the first things in Flare is the project organizer. So surprisingly, that organizes all of the things for your project. This is a really clever name for what it does. But essentially, this is where you're going to have information like your stuff for your targets, what your table of contents is, your variables, and we're going to walk through what each of those particular things are as we get further in, but this is basically the window where all of that information is stored. And if you see down there below, I can't point to it. I can. Okay, the project organizer, its counterpart is the Content Explorer. All right, so the Content Explorer holds all of the content-related stuff for your project. This is your topics, your images, your style sheets, your page layouts, your table styles, and your snippets. All of those things, if you're not familiar with them now, we will be explaining, so it will make more sense. So essentially, when you're working in a project in Flare, you would move between these two windows, which are just going to be your side panel in Flare. Something I realized I didn't put in the presentation is that you can easily move windows around in Flare, so you can have different things open and different configurations. It gives you a lot of flexibility for your personal workflow. Also, Darci and I don't get anything if you sign up for MadCap Flare. I realize it sounds like we're pitching it. We just really like the tool. Also, MadCap mailed me some swag to give out to you guys. I don't have it yet. FedEx has not delivered it, but I will have it at the next STC meeting. For those of you who attended, I'll be happy to give you some MadCap items that they sent.
Which version are you sort of targeting here?
Sure. Yeah. So we're using the 2017 version, release 3. So the latest version. We just did the update, I think, a month ago. Is that correct, Darci? When we switched to
well, yeah, the version that we did was a month ago. I think the latest version is less.
Maybe it's less
actually, it's just a little less than a month. The latest version that they have.
Yeah. So we just switched to the latest version. So that's what everything you're seeing is from the latest version of Flare. Good question. I would give you something, but I don't have the MadCap swag yet. Sorry. You earned it.
Keep a list.
Yeah. Okay. Mental checklist. Okay.
So in the content viewer that Bethany just showed you that's where all of the content is. Obviously, that makes sense. So all of your topics or your HTML files, however you prefer to refer to them, are located in that folder. And it starts in a master folder actually called content. And then from there, by default, all the topics you create go in that one folder, almost like it's a root folder, but you can create subfolders in there for different projects or different sections. And then that'll keep it more organized for you. But basically, pretty basic. A topic is a chunk of information about a particular subject. And one of the things that is, I think more and more writers function this way today, is that Flare is, I can't speak right now. Flare excels at being a topic-based authoring tool. That's really how they designed it to work. Not that you have to use it that way. So you might have, be talking about cars, and you might have 200 topics about cars, and you might have it broken up into engine, interior, exterior, or however you break it up. And then just broken out into the smaller pieces and chunk it out. It really works well to use it as a topic-based product. It seems to stay more organized and be easier to manipulate your files when you need to rearrange something, whether it's in the table of contents or in the content folder itself. So let's see. So where was I? All right. So basically, the XML editor that I'm supposed to be talking about, that is, it can be confusing if someone's not real familiar what XML is or HTML. But in Flare, the topic, when you view it as a what you see, what you get view, that's the XML editor in Flare. It doesn't matter whether you're writing for online help or print or mobile. It does have the option to let you view it in those views. So when you set up page layouts and style sheets at the top, you can't see it in this screen, but at the top of the interface for each topic, it has the option to let you switch the views. So you can view it this way, which is in PDF, or you can view it as if it's HTML help. So that way you can kind of see it sort of how it's supposed to appear in the finished product. Additionally, and then you don't have to ever look at the code, which is the HTML and XML underneath. But in the next slide, if you want to look at that, or if you need to, let me switch to mine. You can, and they refer to that as the text editor. And that's why I said it can be confusing because, but That's because you're not going to see images here. You're only going to see the code or which has the links for images. You'll see all of the underlying tags for paragraphs or character formatting, conditional tags, anything will all be here. It's good to get familiar with this view, even if you don't need to, because if you do have an issue, sometimes it's really easy to go in here and once you get a little bit familiar, it stands out. And sometimes those issues are easier to fix from this view. I find that it's less necessary than it was in the early days of Flare because they've really done such an amazing job with cleaning up the product over the years as it's matured. So you don't need to be an expert on XML or HTML to use Flare. But this is just an option for those who are comfortable writing in the code view or text view. And also, if for some, what you can do, oh, we don't have a screenshot. There is an option if you have an error in here, something comes up and you're not sure what's wrong. There is an option in here to have a side-by-side view of the text editor with the what you see, what you get XML editor. And if anything that you click on in the XML view will be highlighted in this text editor, so you can see in the code where, you know, where that particular content is and what the code is for it, if for some reason you need to do that.
Yeah, so the first time I actually went and looked at the actual text editor was, of course, after I broke something, which was a terrible find and replace accident where I was replacing a bracket and it replaced it all in the code. So I was like, now I can see what's wrong now that I've gone and looked at it and can see it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. It's not as scary as it sounds for anyone who's not familiar. I mean, in this day and age, more and more technical writers are truly technical and understand, you know, code even when they don't have to, you know, even if you're not working on a product that requires it. But Flare uses standard formatting for all of that. So if you are familiar or more comfortable with that, you'll appreciate the options for how you can view that and work with it in Flare.
Okay. All right, so we were going to show you the table of contents. This is probably, I think, the area I was most comfortable with when I first started in Flare, because I was like, a table of contents. This makes sense to me. It's not unlike what you would see in a printed book conceptually. You can see that you have the topics organized there for the particular structure, and they're in little books, so you can click the little drop-down arrow and see which topics are organized. So it gives you a lot of flexibility. So you can create multiple TOCs if you need to, so you don't have to have all your output coming from a single guide. It's not like a printed document where you have the one TOC and all the content follows it. One thing we will mention or go into more detail on later, you'll see that some of those topics have like blue or red in the little box next to them. Those are conditions, so you can actually tell Flare, all right, I have these things in my table of contents, but I don't always want them to be shown. So if I'm doing this kind of output, please, with this condition, put that topic in there so it can tell on its own once you have given it instructions what needs to go in different types of outputs. Or if you have different versions, or you something Darci goes through regularly at work is having variations of the same documentation for multiple clients. So we'll talk more about conditions later, but that gives you a lot of flexibility to really only have as output the content you want, instead of having to go in and manually make changes. Okay, variables. So a variable is a little string of unformatted content, such as a name or a phone number. I have some of them shown here, that you edit in one place in this variable set editor, and any changes you make are made throughout all of your content. So an instance when this might be really useful is if you have the name of a product that's in all of your documentation, you can use a variable for it and have like product name. And then if for some reason your product name were to change, which I think has happened to a lot of us at various different times, you would go into this variable set and say, okay, instead of calling the product 1, it's now called product 2. Please make that change throughout all of my documentation. And it would immediately have that in your output. So instead of having to go and do a find replace, which as we've learned could lead to terrible accidents, or or something else, Flare would do that for you. So we also use this for things like the month for the documentation or the year, so you can go through and make those changes. And you can also have multiple sets of variables. So it gives you a lot of flexibility to have little discrete pieces of content that you want to control at this level instead of having to go and type the same thing over and over again and then think, wow, this will be terrible if this ever changes. So
nope, not with a variable.
yeah, not with the variable. Copyright dates. That's another good one. So a snippet, I totally got variables and snippets confused when I first started. So a snippet is sort of like a miniature topic. So it's a short piece of information or content that you can actually format as if you had it in a topic, and then you can insert it into your other topics or whenever you want to have a small piece of review. So the one I have here, I say, for more information, please email this group. If it's something you're going to have over and over and over again in multiple topics, and you want to just be able to put that snippet in, then you can add it. And that way, for some reason, if in this example, our email address were to change, I would be able to change it here. So it can be as small as a word or a phrase, or it can be as large as like a small topic. So it's something that you see yourself using often, but still want to be able to control in a single location instead of having to also go and make that change throughout if you needed to.
And you actually can use snippets for whole topics. It's not advised, but I was put in a position when I first started using Flare, because they've had snippets for a long time, so it's a mature feature. But I was put in a position where I had to include the same topic over and over throughout a table of contents, up to 20 times in some cases. And you can't, with HTML, you can't actually do that easily because it will get confused if you point to the same topic from multiple places in the table of contents, and a user will lose their place because the cursor will move to the bottommost instance of that topic. So I had to create snippets, and so that way I can insert them into up to 20 different places for full topics. So it does work, and you can put anything in a snippet, a table, an image, really anything. You can use conditions in there and variables. So while it's not meant to be used for large pieces like that, I just wanted to point out that, if there's a need, you really can be, it is flexible. So, excuse me. So in any, printed output or in many, we'll have a glossary, depending on the product or the type of content you're producing. And Flare has a few ways that you can produce a glossary. You can produce it manually by creating one or more glossary files and adding to it both the name and the definition. And you can also, there are also some automated features. So Flare has an auto-generating feature for a glossary. And you can create multiple glossaries for different reasons. So you might have a main glossary for, just typical, word usages that happen in your company or your product. You may have a specific one for, for several different products that have their own, naming conventions for things, or you might have an acronym glossary or multiple acronym glossaries if you have similar acronyms but have different definitions for different products or different pieces of content. So one of the things you can do is in an online help, for instance, you can have a link to the glossary. So when the word appears in your topic, a user can click on it, and it has a little pop-up that can show up and say, hey, here's the definition. And then in addition to that, in an online help, Flare allows you to place the glossary on the left accordion panel, the same location where the content and project viewer are located. And a user can just click on that and go through the glossary and look up whatever they're trying to find that might be in there. And there is a search feature that goes with it. And the way that you add a glossary is pretty simple. If you're doing a PDF and you want that glossary to be in there, you simply can create a topic and then insert what's referred to as a proxy or a glossary proxy into that page, add a heading just like you see here. And then when you add it to your table of contents and build your output, it will show whatever part of the table of contents that you included it'll appear there. And Flare also has a feature to auto include a glossary. So as long as you have a glossary, you can just leave it out of the table of contents and tell Flare, hey, if I have a glossary, when I build this PDF, throw it in there, and it will add it for you automatically. And you can control the look and feel of the glossary just like anything else in Flare. So you can control the style and make sure it matches everything. So conditions, conditions are one of my favorite things in Flare, and I know that I think they're used in FrameMaker too. Someone could correct me if I'm wrong, but they're used in other products, so it's not a new invention. The way that it works in Flare is that you can apply one or more conditions to just about anything in Flare. You can apply a condition to a topic, to a table of contents entry, to an actual file in the content folder, or to individual paragraphs, or even words in a topic. And there's a lot of reasons that you might use conditions. For instance, I have conditions in a product because I produce it for 2 different groups within our company, and they have slightly different look and feel to their PDFs. And because of that, I have conditions where certain things will show or not show. So it's really easy. You just basically, you can create as many conditions as you want. It's by default, they include online and print only, or I think it's screen. It might say screen only, but they include a screen and a print only condition, which are red and blue. And you can add all the ones you want. There's a million different reasons you would use them. But for instance, I mostly use them in the table of contents. So I have one set of table of contents, and some of those topics will go in all of the content. So I apply no conditions. And some of those topics will only be included in certain outputs. And so I'll apply the appropriate condition. And then when we get to targets, we can show you how in a target, that's where you tell it, if something has this condition applied, either include it or don't include it. And they're simple checkboxes. So it all goes with the whole single sourcing efficiency. Oh, it's still my turn. Okay, so sorry, like I'm not talking too much. Style sheets. As I said earlier, style sheets are, you can use standards cascading style sheet rules. And if you break those rules, Flare will yell at you just like any HTML tool, and you will not be rewarded if you break a rule. So, but you don't have to be a CSX expert to use styles in Flare. And I would caution anyone who uses Flare, please right away start learning how to use your style sheet, because inline formatting is going to just create more work than is necessary in a tool like this. And it's designed to simplify your workload and your time. So the style sheets have several different ways you can look at them. And the way that this one is showing you is the simplified view, right? Mm-hmm. No, yeah. But you can also, there's 3 ways. Well, actually there's 3 ways. There's a simple view, there's an advanced view, and then you can, and then again, if you prefer to look at the code in HTML or coding, you can go and look at it in a notepad document within Flare. And you can you can manage your style sheet from the text view if that's something you're comfortable with. Unlike traditional style sheets, if you're familiar with them, you can have one or more style sheets in Flare. The way that we use style sheets in our group is Flare includes a feature called style sheet mediums. And what that means is you have a master style sheet with all of your styles on it. But then, for instance, for your print output, maybe you have 5 styles that are different for your print output, and that's it. So instead of having a duplicate of your master style sheet and having to make changes to styles in 2 style sheets every time your company rebrands itself or sets new rules, you can just go into the different mediums within one style sheet. And you just have to make those changes. If you make those changes in the default view, it will change them for your default style sheet medium, as well as your print medium, if that's your second medium. And additionally, then when you do change something in a second or third medium, such as your print medium, it will only make that change to the style that you edited in that output. It will not affect your default or your online help view. And you could actually have multiple mediums beyond 2. So for instance, in our style sheet, we have an online help output or style sheet medium. We have a Word style sheet medium, and we have a print or PDF style sheet medium as well. And this really saves time. So we only have to manage one style sheet for the majority of our styles, and it prevents us from having any issues or having any differences come along that we didn't catch between different outputs.
Yeah, one of the main things that we've done differently between our mediums is we're not like, it's a totally different look and feel, but we recently were going through and making sure all of our font sizes made sense, because we originally had it so it was the same across whether it was online help or print, and you really don't need the same heading size in a print document that you do on a screen online. So stuff like that where you want to have a slightly different size, but overall it's pretty similar. That's when you would use those mediums.
And one of the things we both talked about that we wanted to make sure we mentioned here is if you decide to use Flare, or if you use Style Sheet in another tool, and that's something new to you, first of all, don't delete any of the default styles until you've made sure that you don't need them, because sometimes there's styles that do things that are not as obvious on the front end, and you don't want to break anything. So be sure of what you're doing. Secondly, don't go overboard with your styles. You know, you want to keep your style sheet as streamlined as possible, and really be thoughtful about the styles you create, and if it's really something that you need as a style for your entire project. Because if you make these things too big, they start to get hard to control, and then you end up having duplicate styles, and you end up having to go back and clean it up.
Even if it's something so simple, I think, Darci, we found that in the style sheet when I started, there was like a heading 8 style. And we started to question, is there a scenario when we really should have a heading 8 documentation? At that point, have we done something wrong with the structure of the documentation? We probably don't need this style. So things like that where it made sense at the time, I guess. But, really be thoughtful about how will I be using this? Does it actually have content?
Well, because you're right, because there's a difference between being really detail oriented and going overboard. And I think as technical writers, more of us than not tend to want to be really want to fine tune everything and have it be as nice and clean and as efficient as possible. But it's really easy to get carried away with a style sheet. And so, we learned along the way that, it's better to have fewer styles and then come across something and go, oh, we're doing this 10 different times. We need to make a style for this, and really approach it from necessity rather than, trying to be overly proactive.
All right. Okay. So page layout. So a page layout is an element you create in your project in order to determine your page specifications, which sounds really fancy, but that's like how large are your pages? What are your margins? What are your headers and footers like? And this is for all of your print-based output. So that's whether your Word documents or your PDFs. This page layout is where you control what that's going to look like. So for instance, you can see in the screen I have here that we have this that's a variable that says default product name, so that this page layout knows, all right, so at the top of every heading, I'm going to put the name of the product. And then below that, it says, okay, heading level 1, whatever is the heading level 1 on this topic, that's what I'll put here. So instead of having to go through and customize that, you really, once you've created your page layouts for your content, you shouldn't need to look at them again. They should just output your content in the format you need. And you can see here, we have a few different pages kind of on the right. So there's like a standard default page. You could have an empty page if you want to have, if you're actually planning to print your output and you need left and right pages, that's an option. We made a decision that we're like, if people insist on having PDFs, we're going to trust that they're not actually printing them. And we will not make left and right pages. Everything will be right pages. So that was Darci and I being very stubborn. So we're all right pages.
Left and right pages are a pain in the behind, if you ask me, even though Flare has the feature for them and there's times where you want to use them. But yeah, in today's day and age, we were definitely in agreement on that.
So you can have multiple page layouts if you want to. We try to use variables to control what the content is because we want the overall look and feel to be the same across all of our products. We don't want to have different margins for a different type of documentation. It really should all look the same. So that's why we have those variables there, because we want it to be simple and consistent. So you can also do things like, insert background images here. If you want to have your title pages look a certain way, you customize it. So this just lets you set everything up. And then when you're producing your output, you tell it, I want to use this page layout, and it'll automatically put that on all of your output. So
And
it's pretty straightforward.
you can also control your body, the body margins here too, if you want.
Oh yeah, that's true. Thank you, Darci.
For your content. Yeah, I just occurred to me. Yeah.
All right. So on the flip side, I think I'm switching. Okay, there are master pages. So this is what you're going to use for outputting your topics if you're doing like online help or HTML5. This is for your online output. So you can see it looks kind of different and a little weird. This is one thing I didn't mention about page layouts in the master pages. What you see in kind of that editor isn't exactly, well, okay, that was weird. I think my screen just went white for a second. I don't know if that showed up or not.
It did for a little bit.
It did. Okay, so this is a master page, and this is what it's going to use for outputting your topics when you're using HTML5 or web help. So they're like page layouts, but they're specifically designed to display in HTML. And you'll see that it has, I know it's a little small, but it has these little gray boxes that say things like breadcrumbs proxy, topic body proxy, toolbar proxy. So those are, these ones I believe were auto-generated through Flare, but it's basically the way the master page is understanding, okay, at that particular spot, that's where I'll put the breadcrumbs. So that'll be the location to where this topic is in the hierarchy. And the body proxy, that's where when I'm outputting a topic, that's where I'll put the body. And those other things in brackets, those are also those are variables like we showed before. So we have our product name again, and then down at the bottom we have our confidentiality statement, because that's also something we use variables for. So it's really, really similar to the page layout, but you just have these proxies that are going to tell it where your content needs to go in that particular topic output. Does that all make sense? Okay. Hopefully my screen doesn't mysteriously go white again. I think I clicked.
Now that you said something, it's going to go like
Yeah,
that.
sorry. I'm waiting for it to change to the next slide. Okay. So the skin is basically for that. This one's a HTML5 skin editor. This is what controls that look and feel of your output. So that's whether it's the where the topic toolbar is, where that accordion that Darci was mentioning, your glossary can appear, where that is. The colors, your brand logo, what the position is for your panel, how many levels you're showing for your TOC. So it's also where you can choose to show like your index, your glossary, whether you have favorites. So it's all of that ability to customize what your output is going to look like in this one's in HTML5, or if it was in web help, that also has a skin. So you can easily go in here and make any choices you want to customize it. Darci and I have one customized, so it adds our Fiserv logo, and it puts in a particular brand color of orange, which is very specific. I know Darci knows the hex code off the top of her head because it's come up a few times. So this is really that piece for branding your all of your online content. It also has a lot of flexibility here about your topic toolbars, and that's, I think, in pretty recent versions, it lets you customize, like if you want your topic toolbar at the top and what sort of icons you want it to look like. So you have more features in the HTML5 one, which is what I'm showing here, but there also are a lot of features in the web help too. So it's fun to play around with the skin, and that is the piece that's going to decide what your output looks like for online. Okay. All right, targets. So this is sort of, the target is like the culmination of everything else we've shown you so far. So it's a little different conceptually for those who have been using Word or something else. The target is the basically an instance of your output. So it's like an engine that takes all of your files and settings and brings them together to produce your result. So this is how Flare knows in this example, okay, I'm going to be creating a PDF. And I want to use the style guide table of contents. I'm going to use this page layout and this style sheet. So this is how Flare knows what I want it to publish. Or you could also output if you're not publishing. But ignore that. So you can see there's all these other things on the side. I didn't put screens of all of them, but there's one for conditional text. So you would go through all those different colors of conditional text and say, okay, I want you to include these and exclude these, and really customize which variables you want it to use. So this is where it all comes together and you're telling Flare, this is the content I want, and this is what I want you to reference. So you might have a lot of targets. I think that tends to be a thing. We don't have a lot of TOCs or anything. We have a lot of targets, because you can also put in here, if you want to publish, where it needs to put your documentation, and it will go in, whether that's, you know, just putting it out on a network drive or a SharePoint site, or like, you know, through FTP on a server. When you click that publish button, it will send all of your files where you need to be, where they need to be, so you'll have the latest version. And there's a lot of other options in there that are, some of which I've never used, I have to be honest, but it's really lets you customize exactly what it is you want to build, so that you don't have any confusion about, well, what style sheet am I using, or which page layout is it? All of that is controlled here at your target. And I name them really clever things, like this one's named PDF, because I wanted to know that that one was for PDFs. But that can also be named after a particular product or whatever it is you're doing. So does that all make sense? Questions? Okay. I explained it perfectly. So that's really all the major elements of the UI. We didn't go through everything on the ribbon, because everything there really relates to what we showed you. So we were trying to give you what are the main pieces of Flare. So our last piece was to go into kind of some best practices and tips. And I can say that the ones that I added here are because they're things that I learned by doing wrong. So you are having the benefit of not having to make those same mistakes as you move forward, if you are also using Flare or use Flare at some point down the road. So I think I'm going to hand it back to Darci for this one.
All right. So I know we use the word single source a million times, because that's really what this tool, you know, teaches you to do. So to summarize a lot of the things that we went over, talked about applying condition tags to content that is different, you know, topics, snippets, targets. You know, condition tags, you're gonna manage them in different ways from different locations. So in your topics, you're gonna manage them within the topic, whether it's the content or the table of contents entry, and in snippets as well. You can condition there. Say you have a snippet on, you know, 20 different topics, but it should only show up in the training manuals for those topics. You can condition that snippet just like anything else. And then in your targets, you'll control whether to include or exclude those from there. Using variables, you know, we use variables everywhere now, but we don't get crazy with them. Just like with conditions and the style sheet, our motto is keep it simple, you know, streamline. So if you repeat a product name, as Bethany mentioned earlier, or a version or an industry name or an address or the copyright, you know, those are great things to use as variables, but you might also be conditioning those as well. So you can insert a variable inside of a topic and then decide, well, this variable should only show up for this output, and have two variables in a row where one shows up for this product, one shows up for the other, for whatever, you know, if it needs to be that complex, you can be. So in a lot of applications, you know, as Bethany again mentioned earlier, you have to use find and replace, and we know that that can create problems, and different tools, even in Flare, can miss some of your locations if there's even a slight difference in the term that you're looking for. So variables really help prevent those issues from happening. Some people get carried away and they'll use them for, you know, for formatting management as well. That's a whole other topic. We have found that doesn't work for us. So we use them for more simplified things, like we already mentioned. So as far as snippets, I would say that, you know, for the most part, you want to keep those to things like, you know, maybe you have a note that gets reused, or you can use that for an address as well. In a different locations. You can use a snippet, say you only include the address in training manuals, but not for online help for some reason in a topic. Well, you might, within that snippet, go beyond that and go, okay, but for this client, they have this address or contact. So within that snippet, we're using a variable. So it can get pretty detailed. And as you know, in single sourcing in general, the more that you use those features, the more comfortable they get. And it seems like it can be really overwhelming at first. And I'm sure we haven't helped make that less overwhelming. but the reality is when the fewer steps that you have, the more steps you take at the beginning to set these things up, the fewer steps you're going to have to take later when you're creating your content and you have those deadlines looming. And that's really what it comes down to. So next is customizing your style sheet. So as I kind of alluded to most of this earlier, I'm talking about avoiding local formatting. I didn't really go over that in detail, but we're all going to have, for most of us, we're all going to have some local formatting for one reason or another, whether it's out of habit or,
Sorry, I'm really sorry. So we didn't actually explain what that means for those who aren't familiar. But that's when you're selecting like specific things like make this bold or, make this a slightly larger size or italics. That's what we're saying when we mean local formatting. Yeah,
or or when this particular title is always in red font or something. If it's something that you're doing more than once or twice or on any kind of regular basis, then you want to create a style. And Flare actually does have a feature for suggesting all of these things, which if we have time, we can go over it. Otherwise, we could talk about it another time. But so basically when you customize your style sheet, as we said before, the goal is at first when you take a style sheet, if it's in Flare, for instance, you're going to want to take a look at all the styles and just get an idea. Okay, what can I use? What will I use? What do I not think I need? And kind of get a feel for what's necessary and what's missing, and then you can go from there and determine, do you need to create new styles? Do you need to modify some of the existing ones? Often it's kind of a smart with some of the basic styles, especially like the, I don't know. Paragraphs, you're going to want to modify your default paragraph style based on what you typically use, what your typical margins are, obviously. But beyond the basics of your default paragraphs, you definitely want to be careful what high-level default styles that you edit, because it's going to affect everything at the high level in your product and your projects. But if you're comfortable with style sheets, have at it. Whatever you think works for you. Flare is as flexible as you want it to be. And you can really do some neat things. You can have one style sheet and have completely different look and feel by using style sheet mediums for different outputs. You can have different fonts, different sizes, different colors, different heading levels set up, different table styles, all within the same style sheet by just using those style sheet mediums we mentioned earlier. And I use them on a regular basis, and it really cuts down my my preparation time when I'm getting ready to publish anything for multiple different uses or different divisions or clients. So definitely prepare to take time to really understand your style sheet and at least just understand all of the basic styles and how they're serving you and what's the best use for creating new ones.
Okay, sorry, I advanced the next slide too soon. My apologies.
No, it's okay. We're getting late anyway.
So one thing, so our advice here is create a structure for your project. So this has come up because we learned from a different product at our company that things weren't planned so much as evolved in the Flare project. And you really don't want a project that evolves, because then you're constantly trying to make exceptions to figure out where is my content going in my folders. I'll just make a new folder and put all this stuff in there. And then you end up with some form of chaos where the writer who's using it has grown to understand it. And, it's like Stockholm syndrome. They now identify with their captor. But anyone new coming in is like, what is this madness? I just want to try. I'm trying to output something and I don't know what's going on. Yeah. So not that happened to me. And that wasn't, Darci was not the writer who had grown to sympathize with her captor. That was, you've been there where you come and you go, wait, which side were you on? you came in and you were like, what has happened? So so our advice here was, when you're starting a new project, take the time to plan your structure ahead of time. Okay, how am I storing my topics? Am I putting those all in separate folders? Am I doing it by subject matter? Really like have a plan and write it down and stick to it, because otherwise it's really easy to just kind of go with expediency and just put things in places and be like, well, I'm going to put all my snippets. I'm just going to put them all in the snippet folder. And then later you're like, what are all these snippets doing here? Why didn't I put them in a particular subject matter? There's no right or wrong answer, I think, is what we've learned to how you organize it. It's really depends on what your content is, how much content you have, because sometimes, you know, you can keep a really simple structure for a small project. Other times you have something incredibly complex. But one thing we did find is try to keep that folder structure as flat as possible. So when you're putting your topics in folders, don't have folders within folders within folders within folders for your topics. It's going to become mayhem pretty quickly. And also try to have naming conventions for your topics. So this also came up with the other product that I referred to, because the files all had these incredibly long names with a complex numbering system. Instead of being sorted, they were all just like put in one folder and were numbered. And we had problems with character limits. So if you tried to move those files to another folder, you would get an error because Microsoft's like, I don't know what to do with this thing with a 50 character limit that's in a folder and a folder and a folder and a folder. So really keep in mind that you want to describe your topic a short, useful title as much as you can, so that you're not later trying to figure out, how can I move my content around to have it make sense? Because it's so hard to rename and restructure once you're already so far down the path, because then you look at all of it and you're like, there's just too much. I can't tackle this. I'll just keep going because I have no choice. So I'm sorry for anyone who's in that situation. Hopefully no one is. You're at the point where you can start at the beginning and think about what am I approaching it? So it's not a very fun job to go through and plan your whole project, but I recommend doing it because it will save you a lot of pain and heartache and Stockholm syndrome. You really want to avoid that at all costs.
That's your content strategy.
That's my
your content design.
Yeah.
Yep.
Also known as avoiding Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah.
Don't let your content. That'd be a new presentation. Don't let your content hold you hostage. So the other thing was, I have on here, remove extraneous project files. So if you go and create like a default Flare project, they helpfully put in a bunch of stuff for you that they think you might need, and you probably don't. They'll just put in some targets, and they're like, well, here's a TOC and here's a welcome topic. And I'm like, I don't need a welcome topic. So at the beginning, tidy all of that up. And as you move forward, take some time also to look at your content to see if you're holding on to things you don't need, because then you end up in that same situation where you might be reproducing something because you don't know you already have it if it's not organized well, or like, what is all of this? Like, you might have outputs that you're not, targets you're not using anymore, but they just kind of sit there. So we try to take time to actually like evaluate and tidy up. You want to keep a clean workspace, because I think something we haven't said outright, but we kind of alluded to, is that Flare is a robust tool that has a lot of functionality, and if you're not careful, you can get in over your head really quickly if you're not being really cautious and thoughtful about the decisions you make, because you can just sort of be like, I just need to get stuff done. Let me throw everything into this tool, and magic will happen and it will all come out beautiful. So you have to be really responsible for what decisions you're making. Okay, the other one I had is keep a style guide. I know everybody has a style guide. I hope everyone has a style guide for whatever job they're in. But something Darci and I realized is you need a Flare style guide too. So specific things for... Sorry, I'm hearing a weird crunching sound.
Not here.
Okay. Well, all right, I will forge ahead. So, what are your conventions? Same as any style guide for your word usage, your terminology, your capitalization, but also specifically as it applies to Flare. So I know when I came in there for a particular style sheet that Darci, I think, is kind of alluded to, that had a lot of styles. How many styles? It was like 400.
It was the person who did it had good intentions and super smart and talented, but they got so granular that it was just beyond reasonable expectations to be able
So-
for everyone to use it.
And as a new person to Flare, I came in, I was like, I would like to create a topic. What is all of this? I just want to make a heading. And then there were like 20 different heading styles.
Yeah.
And it was really confusing. So
Now we have one for each output. That's it.
yes, now we have standard
One
heading
heading one. Yeah.
But you know, your styles, you are going to have more styles as you go down the road, especially if your content is really complex and you have different outputs. So you want to have a guide to use this style for this, so that anyone new coming in, or even yourself, if it's not a style you use a lot, you don't have to wonder, why is this style here and what does it want from me? I'm sure it had a purpose, but I have no idea of discerning what it is. So really keep records of that and have just a guide you can refer to. Another thing on here is chart. Have a chart on which to record your target settings, because otherwise it's really easy to lose track of, do I already have a target that pretty much does what I want? Because as I showed you, that has all of these different settings, you know, the TOC and the, you know, the style sheet. So just have an easy way to check, okay, what targets do I have? Where are they, if they're publishing, where are they publishing to? So you don't have to go into each one to check to see what is this serving, what purpose. So I recommend having that as a guideline. We mentioned having naming conventions. Have those written down, so that if you do have some complexity to your naming conventions, it's not like some sort of obscure language that no one else speaks besides the writer who's working on it. So really, a lot of this is just document what you're doing and how you're doing it, because it will only help you down the road. I also have here each condition tag and how you use it. I don't use that many condition tags. I probably use like 4, and they're all pretty descriptive. But sometimes, like what Darci has with a lot of different products and lots of specific things that need to be changed, she has.
Yeah.
If I would have a project, I wouldn't necessarily know what all the condition tags.
Well, I wouldn't either, because it's the rainbow, but I have a lot, because in one of my Flare projects, for instance, it's one group of products, but I have at least 10 different outputs, and and I have at least 6 different sets of release notes and release dates in there. And so it's really important to be able to single source that I use conditions and variables, because then I'm still using one page layout for all of these things, and I'm controlling everything in the targets. It's really helpful.
All right, and our last piece of advice.
Version control or source control. Most of you have probably used it. Most of you probably have had some pain with certain types of version control, because it can be painful depending on the tools you're using and how you have to access it. But the great thing about, especially with Flare, it's really helpful to have version control, especially if you have more than one user on your Flare project or multiple projects. Or even if you just need someone to have access in case you're not there or you fall off the planet, because things happen, and it's really nice. For instance, I was out recently, over the holidays, and something needed to be done on one of my products, and it was really easy for Bethany to be able to go, and even though it's not something she's into very often, she had access. She had a copy on her local drive, and she was really able to, go in and make some quick changes for somebody, and, without me being there and without having to go through a whole process of figuring out which version is it, where is it, what do I do? And so that's all part of that whole multi-author, setup that we have. But one of the things about version controls is, you're still working on a local copy. So you're not working directly off the server. So it's not going to slow you down a whole lot, as long as you have good connectivity within however you're set up. And, multiple authors can make changes and go back to the server, and it gets updated. And then as long as everybody's set up and making sure that they update their local version on a daily basis, they're going to have the latest version, and they won't step on anybody's toes. Flare does have the additional feature of turning on a setting that forces users to get a question when they close any project that says, "Hey, you have pending items? Do you want to check these in?" And it can do it all at once. It allows you to add comments. If you require comments for every time you check in files as to what you did or why you did it, So that's, that's just part of a standard source control feature. And it really saves things, because if your computer crashes and you've been up to date, then you simply get a new computer, you install Flare, and you go to your source control and import your project, and you're good to go again. So it's very helpful. Flare started out a million years ago when I started using it with Microsoft Team Foundation servers, otherwise known as TFS. And it also had Microsoft Visual Source Safe. And then beyond that, you had to use third-party plugins to try to use other source control tools, which I did back then. I used Subversion, and it worked well. But today, they connect with all the big ones: Subversion, Git, Perforce, and they even have what's called a third-party plugin option for, obscure types of source controls or ones that they do not support yet. And I'm pretty sure they all work pretty well. Most of them have been in there long enough now as part of Flare that the integrations are fabulous. And I highly recommend you consider using their source control integrations if you do version control, rather than managing your source control check-in and checkouts outside of Flare. I think you'll be really happy with that option, because it saves you some steps, and then Flare tracks it within Flare if you do it that way. And, Flare has icons and indicators to let you know this file's checked out, or if you try to check out a file and someone else has it checked out, it will let you know that. And you have the option to lock files when you're editing them so that another user cannot even edit it. And that prevents issues as well. So overall, source control, use it, love it.
All right. And that was everything we had. We wanted to leave time for questions. I know we probably answered everything, but
yes, like an oracle.
And we can't promise to have all of the answers, but
we hope someone else will have some of the answers, because then we learn.
Yeah, we're also planning to take advantage of the other knowledge in this room as well if any questions come up. So, any questions?
Come on, I know there's people.
Alexandra has a question. All right, I switched the mic to omnidirectional, so hopefully it'll pick you up. If not, I guess we can repeat back the question.
I just wanted to know if this was like a collaborative tool, or if it sounded like you make a change, like you add a style to everyone else is access to that style, or is it just individual users?
So that's a good question. I think it's all project driven. So we talked a little bit about projects, but basically, we have, like, Darci has a project for her online help and release notes, and I have a different project for like what I'm producing, because we have totally separate needs, but we're using the same style sheet. So in that sense, anything I'm working on in a separate project would not be synchronized over to Darci's project. But if we are in the same project, that's when things would be shared. So if she was coming in and making changes to like the, keep trying to use our product names, but that doesn't help you guys at all. So if she was doing it for my documentation, it would be changed there. So it's all project driven. So you can have multiple projects. So that's another way to control your content. So you don't have one massive Uber project that tries to do everything, if it makes more sense to have a few small projects and have them share some of the same resources.
But Flare does have an option for using what's known as global linking. So you can have your style sheets, your page layouts, and all your core files that you want everybody using the same. You can have those stored somewhere, and you can set up what's called global linking. So every time people open up their project, that would update. And so if you go into the global project that everyone's connected to, in a, from their local, whatever their specific project that they're assigned, it would. Any change you made, then everyone else would get those changes in their individual Flare projects. So that is a feature Flare has.
That answer your question? Okay, awesome. Also, anyone who's on the call, feel free to ask questions in the chat. Alex is standing by to receive your chat messages. Or you're welcome to just speak up. I think everyone should be able to be unmuted if they so choose. Have a question in the room.
Hi, talk more about this version control. How did it help you in that one instance navigate to the right document when you were familiar with it?
You want
Well, any differently than knowing that the last updated date in a file name or something like that?
yeah.
How is it helpful specifically?
So I don't know, does Darci say we use TFS right now for our version controls. So like what Darci was mentioning, the time that I needed to go into her project, I definitely could go in and check to make sure I'm connected to TFS. So for most of her projects, I'm not connected to them locally because I don't need to be working in them. So when I knew I need to make a change to something in her project, I went to source control and retrieved it.
Okay, so it's a security. It enabled your access to that file.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Yeah, enabled my access, and also I didn't have any uncertainty that there was like another copy out there somewhere that Darci was working on, because Darci is
Right, because our process is that all of our projects are connected to source control, and we have to check in on a daily basis. So there should be very little reason, unless my computer crashes before I checked in stuff and then I want to cry. But there should be very little reason why, if I get sick tomorrow again, my bronchitis comes back all the way, and Bethany has to go into a project that she's not used to or that she doesn't have locally, there should be no reason why she can't import that project into Flare. And it usually takes less than 5 minutes unless it's a really large project. And for her to go right in very quickly and have all the latest version on my files and be able to do whatever she needs to do. And that's really one of the benefits to it, I think.
And if you screw something up, you can roll it back too.
yes. Yeah, that's also true. There are previous versions, so if something went horribly awry,
Nice.
hopefully
You can
break permanently. We can always go back.
And you can branch off versions as well. We don't really do it that way. We just save off because it's smaller projects. Like for my projects, for instance, I save off final versions after each release. I save a zip Flare file just as a backup for that version because it's just faster, and no one ever asks for it anyway. But you can branch off using, TFS and Visual Studio, or, you can branch off when you finish each release or version.
So we had another question from Jessica, who asked if the team editing aspect works in real time like Google Docs. It does not. It basically is when someone's editing the file, no one else should be editing that file. It would be nice if it worked like Google Docs. I do love Google Docs and being able to dramatically see someone else typing alongside me.
But Flare does have its own built-in instant messaging system if you're on the same network that you could use, which is separate from like your work. I don't know why you'd need it, but they have it. It's actually built into Flare, as well as that you can see who's, you can, when you go to check out a file, even if they don't lock it, it'll show you that someone's checking. Like if there's a pending folder in Flare for source control, and if you open that folder, you can click on a thing that shows you other users, and it'll show you all the files that say Bethany has checked out. So you can see.
One question I was just going to share a little bit of a project of how we manage MadCap Flare. We have content managers who uses Flare and access to our STN repository or a core repository for thousands of documents that we maintain. And for all the different SMEs and editors, we give them a contributor package.
Yeah, awesome.
Which is a finite piece of the documentation that they can add material to it or edit the material. They can't change the layout. And it has to go back to the content manager, and then they have to check it back into the core database. So that way we don't mess up the core database, right? And it's cumbersome, in my opinion, but it can work. I find it too limiting to be on the contributor side of things, because I like to be managing the
But not all SMEs can be trusted, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, therein lies the problem. I mean, Flare has an integration or a linking ability for Word too. If you could get all your SMEs to really know how to use Word, because we know they don't all know how to use Word, they think they do. And it's just a reality. Most people think I've been using Word for 20 years. I'm an expert. No, you're not. But but the thing is, so if you could set up templates in Word and have people go into a Word source document and not screw things up, excuse my language, and just edit the piece that they need to edit for you, and not try to be helpful with the formatting, then you can have it linked to Flare, and then you open up Flare as the technical writer or the editor, and it automatically pulls in the latest changes to that file. So that's a great feature in Flare. The problem again is you can't control what people are doing in Word. So if they mess up that original Word document bad enough, when you bring it back into Flare, not everything maps to the right styles, and you have to re-edit the same content over and over. And so that's unfortunately a great idea that Flare has, but it's not really valid for a lot of people unless you're not editing it in Flare. You're just publishing.
Process challenges, I think, is how we just label some of these things. Yes, workflow issues.
Yeah.
Since we were trying to keep this to an intro, there's like so much more. This actually was a much longer presentation until Darci helped me provide it. And she was like, "Did you need all those slides?" And I was like, "I felt like we did, but maybe too many." Tell them everything.
Like, that's the follow-up presentation.
Yeah, there's a part two.
Wanting more.
Yeah, exactly. But one thing that I think the very first thing I did in Flare when I started was I was in charge of importing documents from Word into Flare, and I was like, "This is not going to be so bad," and it was nightmarish. Yeah,
It's a nightmare.
so then my second job was writing instructions for how to import documents from Word to Flare, because there's a whole style mapping piece. Once you get that figured out, though, it's really not too bad. It's just a matter of understanding how Word and Flare can talk to each other, because they really don't. They like speak the same language, but like really different dialects. So like it sort of makes sense, but not entirely. So that's
One's from Georgia, the other's from New York.
Yeah.
do we have a raise of hands for some?
The only warning I would give about Flare, and this is not Flare's fault, this is a standard CSS rule, and any of you in the room that understand CSS will appreciate this. There's a process where, Word, if you're using Word and you use list items, you've all probably experienced the nightmare of doing bullets in Word and trying to move them around. And why did it change? Why did it change the tab? Why did it change the bullet style? Why did it move the margin? So, it can get really complicated. So then so even in Flare, when you're dealing with list items, or especially if you've imported a document from Word, if you're not careful, because CSS rules can be pretty strict, it'll do what's called nesting when you try to move things around and you're rushing around. You have to think a little differently when you're managing certain things like list items in Flare, because you can't just tab them around the way that you do in Word. And so that's just something to keep in mind, because otherwise it has this lovely thing of breaking the CSS on your page, and all of a sudden all your data looks like it got erased, and it's a little scary if you're not expecting it. So
yeah, copy pasting for Word also does not have the issues, unfortunately.
You have to apply the style.
Right, the style, it still wants the correct styles, and it still is like, I'm rejecting some of these styles from Word. Please fix this. So yeah, Flare.
Because Word has a lot of extraneous coding behind it sometimes, especially if you're pulling from a Word document that's been saved a million times and re-edited by like 20 different SMEs over a period of time. So when you bring that into Flare, or you copy and paste it into Flare, if it's not cleaned up really well beforehand, sometimes it can bring some of that extra coding in there, and Flare can go, no, I don't like it.
Or heaven forbid, you had a really well-intentioned SME who decided to go through and they got confused about the styles, and then they just decided to manually format everything to make it look the way it looked before. Which always makes me want to cry when I see it, because you can like feel the anguish as you look at this. You're like, oh,
you mean like tab, space, return.
So sorry, that's outside of Flare, but that's also something that came from the import process. So if anyone wants to talk importing from Word to Flare, that was how I got started. It's a great way to learn.
There's a guy who posted a macro. It's a VBA macro for stripping out all of the lists, formatting, and it's really nice if you don't want to deal with the going from Word to Flare.
Where did he post this?
You're like, tell me more about this.
Forum.
The MadCap Flare.
Well, that sounds familiar. I've seen or heard someone someone gave me that. Yeah.
The link will be shared.
When I get my swag.
Yeah.
Hey, earned more
more swag.
Yeah. You can post it on the meetup, and then everyone will be able to access it. That would be perfect. So thank
Does
you.
anyone else have any tips?
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that MadCap has a bunch of webinars.
Oh
Yeah,
You can-
for free.
For free, right? You can download them, and they have one of the list bullet items.
Mhm.
And there's one that's excellent, and they also have 2 or 3 on DSS file sheets as well.
Yeah, they have a lot of great educational materials, especially once you know what it is you're trying to learn. I think when I first started, I was like, I don't even know where to begin. I'm gonna
I
wait
think
for
I
those-
every single webinar because it's amazing. You just register for it, and then if you can't attend, they'll send you a link to the recording. You can listen to it at your own leisure.
There's also other features of MadCap has that goes with Flare, like reviewer and MadCap Central that we're trying to figure out if we can use.
Yeah, we thought about it. We're like, there's not enough of us to justify switching to it, but it seems pretty cool. So, well, and then there's like Analyzer, which is a separate tool.
Oh yeah.
For it basically goes through all of your projects and analyzes everything, and that's another way of catching things that you're doing wrong, where it'll say you have a whole folder full of links that are broken.
Yeah, and they have the capture tool, their own capture tool, which has a lot of great features also. But I find that for some of the stuff I used to have to do to my images, I basically used to have to mock up and manipulate a lot of screenshots. It was not fun. And so capture isn't as good as Snagit for if you have to do that kind of work. So I keep asking MadCap when they're going to make a deal with Snagit to combine capture and Snagit into one tool, which would be nice.
If we just buy Snagit, I think we'd be okay with that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because really, I mean, capture is a great tool. It has all kinds of features because it basically, the way their capture tool works, I don't know if whoever's familiar with Snagit and the snag files where you can save. Right, you could save things with layers, so that way it's not embedded, and you don't if you have to undo something and snag it in an image that you already closed. If it's a Snagit file that you have available, you can go back and undo things or redo things without starting from scratch. So MadCap, the way that capture is designed, is everything's done in layers like the snag files. So it's not saved as a hard image. So you can always go back and undo or redo anything on an image that you edited with it. But its editing features are still limited though, unfortunately.
Kind of tailing off the mention of webinars, for someone who's maybe not in a job position with which to learn MadCap, to actually be able to practice on it. Is there some kind of?
They do have a demo that you can download it and try it out. I mean, it's limited on time, but yeah, you could get a lot of practice in 30 days. So before I took this job, I was like, I really should learn something about MadCap Flare. So I highly recommend.
Good workshop idea.
It's a great workshop idea. I'm not volunteering for it, just to
and they have and something they didn't have until I forget how many years ago they added it. So they have just like Microsoft has like its 360 account monthly memberships to have Microsoft products. Flare has something similar for Flare too. So if somebody wanted to use it for a few months and was willing to invest a little bit of money, you can get it pretty cheap for a few months to really learn it before you go, okay, I want to a perennial license, or I want an annual license or something like that.
Is it subscription only, or is there also a one-time buy option?
There's both. Like we don't use subscription in our that's because we've had perennial licenses forever. So we have our our personal license, so it's not subscription based, and those are a lot more, but our company pays for it, so that's okay. And we also have unlimited support, which I think is worth every penny, because there's nothing. Their motto is, don't spend, even if you think you can figure it out, don't spend 3 hours figuring something out in Flare if you can call them and they're happy to help you figure it out faster.
Yeah, they have great support. So, like I
great knowledge and great webinars and tutorials and information.
They're all about customer retention, and it shows.
Yeah, we have to actually like using their products, so that's their goal.
Yeah, we're waiting for our commission check. If any of you buy it, just let us know. Just kidding.
Templates too that come with it
are
good learning tools also, especially like the Word and like the PDF, because if you look at the style sheet, it'll show you, and it has like inherited styles already set up. So
yeah, and they have a tutorial project that you can start with when you do a demo. So it puts everything in there and it says, now try doing this. And it has a whole guide that goes with the project. So it'll walk you through it, kind of all the starting steps. So all of those things in the UI, like we were showing, it'll tell you what to do. So
it just comes across as overwhelming as a tool when you see all these features or when you first get it, because there's so many things it can do. And for everything that Flare can do, just like a lot of Microsoft products, there's 20 different ways you can do it.
Yeah.
So. There's on their website, there are a lot of videos that will show you how to do everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You don't even have to, I mean, it'd be better if you have a copy of Flare to
follow
instructions, but if you just look, just watch them, you still will get a lot of information.
Yeah, they have videos on YouTube too. If you want to watch little short videos, they're right there. They have a whole playlist. They have a cute little like animation that goes with it. Yeah, that's a good place to start if you just want to. You're like, I just want to see some stuff. Like it'll walk you through some quick processes and as a friendly narrator. Yeah.
I will caution though not to try any import and export initially. If you're trying to run the tool.
Yeah.
And then get comfortable with it before you start getting into more advanced topics like importing and exporting, because it becomes extremely difficult.
Yeah, I think that's true of a lot of the features. So I think you really just, if you're someone who starts using Flare, you really need to, like if you're like, yeah, I really think that's the tool for me, and you get your manager or whoever who's in charge of doing it to get it. You definitely want to try to take advantage of like their paid training. They have like beginner paid training and advanced paid training. That's definitely worth it. It's a little pricey, but it's worth it. Aside from that, though, I agree with you. You really want to take your time, because if you think, oh, I'm just going to do all these different things at once, you're going to end up creating more overwhelm for yourself than you need.
Yeah, keep it simple. I think we've said a few times, and Deborah's reminded.
Take it from us. We have been there.
Yeah, it's really easy to be like, the sky's the limit. I have a vision, and immediately start striving for this being the greatest project or the greatest documentation you've ever created. And like, well, let me just start with what I can.
Yeah, day one 10 years ago is like, oh, you can do CSH, you can do context sensitive help. Let's do it.
So, other questions, suggestions?
Comments?
Comments?
Comments.
Oh, do we use comments? Yeah.
You put in comments.
Yeah, you can put in comments. It almost looks a little bit like track changes in Word when you're putting in comments. So you can highlight a particular piece of text and put in your little comment, and it pops in. Bethany left this comment of, why is this here, or something like that. Something really insightful. So it does have that functionality too. If you're working.
Are you talking about annotations?
Yeah, the annotations.
What's that documentation Bible thing that we saw?
Oh, that's the web. That was at the conference.
MadCap conference. Yeah.
You have a way of removing all the comments.
It was.
Published.
Yeah, Darci, there's a way to delete or strip out or not show all of the annotations when you publish, right?
Yeah, it doesn't show.
Yeah.
And actually remove them.
To actually remove them, I think you can just go through and delete all of them, the same as in Word, you do a delete all.
Flare has the built-in, even though the full analyzer doesn't come with Flare, but Flare has the built-in analyzer tools, and one of them is annotations. So you can go in and see on a sort of like a table view in the Flare interface all your annotations, and you can kind of manage them from there.
Yeah, so I think you can.
So you have to manually delete each one.
No, I think you can delete all of them, but I think you might have to do it by topic. So I don't know if you can delete all of them, like for a particular folder. Yeah, I don't know about that.
I haven't actually had any reason to try it, so I don't know.
Yeah, when I used it before, that was one of the reasons we didn't use them. And we didn't want any comments. Yeah.
You didn't want to be like, oh, there they are.
We wanted to strip them out, and we didn't have a way of doing it at that time.
Yeah. Actually, I'll look at that later, and I'll let you know, because now I'm curious.
I made an official request for it. I don't know if they ever did it.
I mean,
they've made a lot of improvements.
They made a lot of, there's a lot of changes.
Yeah, I didn't know if they did.
So,
Oh, you were asking about the documentation Bible?
Yeah, do you remember what they were talking about?
Yeah, it was just a project. It's a sample project with all the different templates in it. So they gave us a copy of it at the conference, so we can share with you.
Sure.
Yeah, that's nice.
Great.
If you want your swag, you have to give something.
If you want your swag, I have to deliver all the swag. Also, you guys all should come to next month's meeting when I can deliver all of your swag. Yeah. So, anything else? I think we're at 8:49. So I guess.
So yeah, again, we'll see you guys next Tuesday, February 13th at UCF in the Student Union. And
yeah, so I want to thank Darci also, who has been, patiently on the other end of this meeting. And questions that come up later, you know where to find me. Send an email. We're happy to do our best to answer. And I guess that's all for our meeting. Karen, do you mind staying on? Because I think we're having a mini ADCO.
Okay, thanks. You guys have a good night.
Thank you so much, Darci.
Bye, thanks.
Yeah, stop. Okay, got it. Yeah, stop broadcast.